Good afternoon. I'd like to first just do a roll call here. I believe we have Hoboken High School, Sacred Heart School in Mount Holly, Princeton High School, Bordentown Regional High School, Fort Lee High School, Plainfield, and a few others. And I'd like to also acknowledge our staff at the New Jersey Motion Picture and Television Commission who have worked so hard to bring you a wonderful program today. Welcome to our Black History Month program, Filming in Black, a tribute to groundbreaking filmmaker Oscar Micheaux. The American movie business started in New Jersey, but the production boom and New Jersey's competitive incentives are creating another renaissance. New Jersey's rich production history is now back on center stage. Just in the last few years, the New Jersey Motion Picture and Television Commission has hosted projects generating over $1 billion for the state economy, with projects such as the Warner Brothers feature film Joker, Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead, The Many Saints of Newark, a prequel to the HBO series The Sopranos, Steven Spielberg's reimagined West Side Story. It's here that Halle Berry shot her directorial debut, Bruise, which premiered on Netflix. The CBS series The Equalizer stars Queen Latifah. Wu-Tang, an American Saga, is back to film season 3, and the list goes on. We've welcomed several New Jersey celebrities back in the Garden State for their latest projects and actively work to increase diversity in filmmaking. But it took decades for Black directors to break into the industry and alter how Hollywood operated behind and in front of the camera and how it viewed Black content. The films that launched the entertainment industry around the turn of the 20th century, starting right here in New Jersey, were created for white audiences by white filmmakers. However, Oscar Micheaux led the charge, launching his own studio in 1919 to raise the overall American consciousness by providing a diverse portfolio of non-stereotyped Black characters, as well as images and stories of African-American life. Oscar Micheaux was the quintessential self-made man, novelist, filmmaker, and relentless self-promoter. It's no wonder the Producers Guild Association has called him the most prolific Black, if not the most independent filmmaker in American cinema. In 2019, Micheaux's masterpiece, Body and Soul, was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry. And in 2020, Tyler Perry told Variety magazine, had it not been for an Oscar Micheaux, there certainly couldn't be a Tyler Perry. Today, we introduce you to Oscar Micheaux.
sound asleep, didn't hear anything, doesn't even know you've been here.
Then everything is all right. That's fine. Please don't worry anymore, dear. I must go now.
Mama! Oh, Mama, come here. I overheard you talking to the teacher, Mommy. I know you thought I was asleep. But what happened was terrible. Until I couldn't sleep. I was so worried. But I had to make out like I was, so you would understand that it was best she didn't know I overheard.
What happened anyhow? The teacher started to tell me something. But when she found out you hadn't told me, then she wouldn't tell me. Oh, this is all so confusing. Why not tell me and have it over with?
I'm going to tell you, Mommy. Tell you the whole story. But I warn you, it's terrible, terrible.
I can guess. You were a bad girl in school this afternoon. The teacher had to punish you and came here to tell me about it tonight. And
Oh, Mommy, no, not that.
when she learned you hadn't told me anything about it, she didn't want me to know you'd been a bad girl, so she decided not to tell me.
Oh, Mommy, no, not that at all. And it was not about me. It was about the teacher.
About the teacher? What do you mean?
If you let me tell you, we'll get to that in time.
Go on. I'm listening. But this sounds like some tale out of a fairy book to me, or the story of a nightmare.
Mommy, it's the teacher that's bad. She's a bad woman.
And now I'd like to introduce you to New Jersey's very own Secretary of State, Tahesha Way, who will moderate our panel.
Thanks, Liz. Happy Black History Month and welcome to all of the great schools joining. So let's get right to our first panel. I have before me first our Dr. Zakiya R. Adair. She has been an associate professor jointly appointed in African American Studies and Women's Gender Studies at the College of New Jersey since 2015. Born and raised in the Bay Area of California, she got her PhD in Women's Studies from the University of Washington in Seattle. Dr. Adair's areas of expertise revolve around Black American cultural history in the areas of Black internationalism and transatlantic Black expressive culture, and the area of feminism and neoliberalism in higher education. Professor Adair is the recipient of many grants and fellowships, including a National Endowment for the Humanities, Schomburg Scholar in Residence Postdoctoral Fellowship, And she has also been accepted to 2 NEH Summer Institutes on Teaching. Let's welcome Dr. Adair. Next up, we have the pleasure of having Onnie Strother, who is an artist, educator, lecturer, and curator with degrees in fine arts and educational administration and supervision. A multimedia artist born in Newark, Onnie's artwork is often inspired by issues of race and power and can be seen in exhibitions, galleries, and online. He is the founder of the J.C. White Creative Aging Project, an arts enrichment program for seniors in Newark public housing. So let's thank Onnie for joining us. All right. Hi, Onnie. Thanks
Hi,
again.
everybody. Happy to be here today.
It's a pleasure to have both you and Dr. Adair, who I am going to start with the first question. So, Doctor, although most people think Hollywood is the motion picture capital of the world, Fort Lee, New Jersey, was the real birthplace of the modern film industry. After completing his first film in Chicago, Oscar Micheaux headed to Fort Lee in 1919 to film Within Our Gates, which we saw parts of. What was the significance of this movie and its filming location during the silent film era?
Thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be here. And I want to say hi to every student that's watching as well. This is so exciting. It's so exciting that you're getting to learn a little bit about Oscar Micheaux. The movie was so significant for a lot of reasons. Within Our Gates was Oscar Micheaux's answer to, or at least statement against The Birth of a Nation, which was a movie released in 1915 that was a racist movie about the Ku Klux Klan. So Within Our Gates was this brilliant and beautiful silent movie that you saw part of. I hope you can see a lot of it. And it was also really significant that it was shot in the state of New Jersey. That really hadn't been done before. It was, looking and using the state of New Jersey as opposed to another place was, a part of Oscar Micheaux's genius. Was he really was someone who wanted to do the unexpected and do what hadn't been done before. And so for this Black American man to produce, write, direct, finance a movie and do it out of New Jersey was absolutely amazing, and was one of the first, and was a brilliant thing that he did. And it also elevated the state of New Jersey's reputation as a potential place to be used as film. So the film was significant, the location was significant, and it really was sort of the beginning of Oscar Micheaux's film history. So that was also really important.
Well, thank you. You expressed it so well, Doctor. A genius, understanding the times, making a statement, and of course, choosing the great state of New Jersey to film. So, Onnie, now, can you amplify Micheaux's depiction of art and culture in the African-American community as compared to Hollywood productions and caricatures of the time? Thank you.
Well, most people were used to seeing African Americans in particular roles. The tradition of what they used to call the minstrel show was one that a lot of people were familiar with. They were shows that were started around the time of the Civil War, and they were usually depicted African Americans in roles that white people would be comfortable with, actually, roles that were as servants and as slaves, and generally buffoons, clowns, things like that. People not to be taken seriously. And that was an important reason for that, because they wanted to keep African Americans before and after the Civil War in positions that were inferior, And they wanted to keep them in positions where they were comfortable with, because frankly, they didn't want people to feel that African Americans were competing with them. And so they wanted to keep them in roles and in positions where they were comfortable in feeling that they were not competitive. And so many of these, the depictions of Black people in films, in magazines, in all popular culture, were ones that were stereotypical. And probably one of the most damaging ones to ever came about in a film, as Dr. just said, in Birth of a Nation. Tens of thousands of people saw that film, and it actually was the most profitable film until Gone with the Wind. And so it was profitable to keep Black people in servile kind of positions and to show them in that way. And it took a person like Oscar Micheaux, someone who was very independent, to show Black people in different kinds of roles. He said that he wanted to show African Americans, we want to see ourselves, our lives dramatized on the screen as we are living it, the same as other people all over the world. And so he worked very hard to show African Americans in all different kinds of roles, as heroes, as villains. He showed people who were not handsome, but he showed some of the most beautiful Black people who've ever been on film. He was the first person to put Paul Robeson on film, one of our greatest heroes. And so I guess that kind of, does that answer the question? We could go on and on and on about, about what Oscar Micheaux did in art and culture. But what he really wanted to do was to show Black people in all different types of ways, to really portray them as human beings. And he got into trouble with a lot of people behind that. But as Doctor said, Oscar Micheaux was really a man ahead of his time. He was self-made, and he really didn't let anybody tell him what to do.
Exactly. You know, he powerfully challenged, as you say, stereotypes at the time, and did it with good trouble, if you will. And there are two quotes that Oscar Micheaux said, and I'm turning to you now, Dr. Adair. One of which was, one of the greatest tasks of my life has been to teach the colored man he can be anything. And Oscar Micheaux also said, your self-image is so powerful, it unwittingly becomes your destiny. So how did Micheaux use the medium of film in his commitment to uplifting the imagery of African Americans? And to what extent do you think, Doctor, he understood the power of cinema to shape culture, policy, and the future?
Thank you so much. Just to sort of continue on what Mr. Strother said, I think that Oscar Micheaux was very unique in a lot of ways. He was a homesteader, which is very unique for a Black man at that time in history. And he was very passionate about producing film because he saw the power of the visual moving image. And one of the things that was so important to him, and this was during the racial uplift period, was finding ways, strategies to help advance civil rights, to help advance Black lives, to make it so that Black people were able to lead a full life, right? So one of the things that he did was he used film, he used cultural production in order to do that. So yes, he produced many, many, many films, and he wrote them. And I always like to say that, you know, before there was Spike Lee, there was Oscar Micheaux. I mean, he really was a one-person machine when it came to producing film and turning it around so quickly. But that also employed numerous African Americans, and it employed numerous African American actors who didn't have any other experience. And if you watch his films, one of the things that I love that he did was that his films always sort of have a really dramatic, big sort of moral point. So his films were not one-dimensional. And I say this to say that he didn't depict African Americans as angelic and only sort of like wonderful and beautiful. He knew that in order to really connect with the humanity of a person, that you had to show a range, right? So he would have movies where it was all Black cast, and there'd be some villains, there'd be some heroes. Usually in his movies, the hero wins out. And so his films were engaging and compelling because they really touched on human nature. But he also then was depicting a more complex, full range of Black life, right? So it's so important to understand that in this time, film is new. Film had not been around. This was a new medium. People seeing moving pictures. It was absolutely amazing. I equate it to, VR technology that is, just emerging today. And pretty soon, I think all of us are going to probably be plugged into VR. And it's this new, intense visual experience. And that's what film was. And so that's what he did by producing so many films. I think it's also important to note just how prolific he was at every year, sort of churning out quality movies, engaging movies, movies that are ranging in theme. And he even had a number of movies that were kind of the detective sort of bad guy, good guy type movies that were really fun. I really hope that you get to watch a full length one of his movies because it was just brilliant. And, and I think that one of the things that is so important about his work is that it really is an example of an individual thriving and pushing through in a time when all of the odds were against him. And to produce something that has lasted the test of time and that is still impactful today, that's beautiful. And that's, what I think. I think that it's beautiful. So I think that we live in a very visual world now. And so I think it's easy for us to understand now how important the visual image is. But it's amazing that in the early 1900s, this individual he knew that if you can produce quality film, it will speak to Black Americans who are watching it, because he also wanted to speak to Black Americans. And then, of course, he was also speaking to white Americans, but he really wanted Black Americans to, as the quote indicated, see themselves as more than the degraded, inhumane way that they had been treated and that they have been constructed through various ways. And he knew that source of pride, that would then inspire individuals to lead a life that was exceptional and to lead a life that pushed past oppression.
I apologize. And you speak, Doctor, of passion and connection with others. These are aspects we witness in history as we celebrate Black History Month. So, okay, Onnie, we just have a few minutes left because we have to get on to our video presentation. Oscar Micheaux also stands as one of the most successful independent filmmakers of any era. He produced more than 40 feature films. A handful of them were filmed in Fort Lee, as we noted, and he did it all without the backing of a major studio. I believe the doctor noted that. What obstacles did he run into as an indie filmmaker, and what expectations did he shatter for African-American artists as storytellers and DIY business moguls?
Right. I'm a former teacher and a former art student, and so I have a particular affinity for a person like Oscar Micheaux. And so I know that I'm speaking to students, and I think it's kind of important to take a couple of things away from what Oscar Micheaux did. One of them was that when he was growing up on a farm in a rural area, he was different from everybody else. And the people in school called him an oddball. That was his nickname, the oddball. He liked to go out and go around and talk to people. He didn't like working on the farm. He wanted to be around people. He wanted to talk with people. He was different from everybody else. And so, I think that students need to remember that when you're a little bit different, it's not that bad a thing. He was always very creative. He was creative in a place and a time when African Americans were not supposed to be creative. So he was different from everybody else. And he went out and when he worked on a job that nearly everybody wanted, he only used that as a stepping stone to make money to do what he really wanted to do, which was to be independent. These things are really important for students to understand. You don't have to be like everybody else. You have to just be like yourself. And that's what Oscar Micheaux always did. He was always an individual different from everybody else. African Americans wanted him to be different. Other artists wanted him to portray Black people the way they wanted to see them. He didn't do that. White people wanted him, and the industry wanted him to portray them in certain ways. He wouldn't do that either. The censors, people whose job was to make sure that you could only see certain kinds of images, he didn't do that either. He went his own way. And for his entire career, he went his own way, producing things, over 40 films, many of which we don't know about today, but he made a life for himself his own way and left something to the world that we can look back on as a people and be proud of, and as a culture and be proud of. Thanks a lot for giving me a couple of extra seconds.
Anytime, Onnie. And let's give Onnie and Dr. Adair a round of applause for their insightful thoughts. Thank you so much. We are grateful for Oscar Micheaux's genius, groundbreaking films and roles, and opening opportunities for African Americans in front of and behind the motion picture camera. A pioneer of his generation, he paved the way for a new generation of talented Black film directors and filmmakers, including two luminaries from New Jersey. And let's introduce today. Let's sit back, reflect, and enjoy the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome Courtland Bragg, who is a 3-time Emmy Award-winning producer, director, and internship coordinator at NFL Films, the filmmaking arm of the National Football League, NFL. He has directed, produced, and edited content for shows airing on ESPN, HBO, CBS Sports, NFL Network, Fox Sports 1, and Amazon Video, to name a few. In 2020, Courtland was one of the youngest members selected to the Athletics NFL 40 Under 40 list, which recognizes stars shaping the direction of the NFL. Aside from producing enterprise stories for NFL fans across the world, he serves as the co-chair for the Black Engagement Network, where he works closely with NFL executives on diversity recruitment, retention, and promotion of minority employees. Courtland is a graduate of Winslow Township High School, class of 2010. And before his journey to the NFL, he played college football at Westchester University, where he graduated with a BA in Communication Studies. Welcome, Courtland. We are so honored to have you here today. We're just going to dive right into our questions. And our first question is, can you just offer, we have so many students that are tuning in today. Can you offer some words of inspiration, some remarks regarding your journey? Any odds that you had to face in as you started in this industry? And can you even just discuss why you decided to pursue a career in broadcasting?
Absolutely. First off, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here to share a little bit, some wisdom along my journey that I hope to inspire and empower those listening. My journey has been twists and turns, a lot of setbacks and failures, and some good opportunities for me as well. But just starting off with the first question, some of the advice or things I learned, just want to give is first off, believing in yourself, having a dream, believing in yourself, but also remembering that no matter how many no's or rejections you get in your life, how many times you may be perceived as failing. You just need one yes. You need one opportunity and focusing on that. And it's a mantra I live by, is trust your journey. I've failed so many times. I've went through so many setbacks, but I just always had to believe that I just needed one person to give me an opportunity. I need one yes, no matter how many no's I've gotten. And that's where I kind of focused on, and I took my one yes and tried to make the most out of it. Another part of I would like to just impart on the students listening is something I wish someone told me when I was a teenager. Work smarter, not harder, is really important. Obviously you have to work hard to get anywhere in life, but you also have to put on your thinking cap and work smarter and have a strategy and a game plan to kind of moving and ascending to where you want to be. I kind of lost on the other questions, but my journey, just in a nutshell, I've been very blessed to tell stories for the NFL and help out, try to create a better culture here within the company. But also, my journey wasn't easy. I used to be a substitute teacher at Winslow Township High School, the same high school that I went to school with. I was a substitute teacher trying to make ends meet, and it was very humbling for me. And I have much respect to the educators out there, so much respect. But that wasn't the destiny that was for me. I didn't go to school to be an educator. So being a substitute teacher, it humbled me, but also taught me patience and the power of service and giving back to the youth and mentorship. So it's something I carry with me today, of always being willing to give back and help those coming after me. So, but that's just a little bit in a nutshell that I've learned along in my journey.
Thank you for that. All right, we're going to dive right into our questions from our students. The first question is from Isabel H., a 10th grader at Hoboken High School. When you started out, what was the part of this industry you needed to work harder at? And do you feel that you're even better at that part now?
Love that question. I think when I got to the NFL and NFL films in particular, I quickly learned that I had a lot of catching up to do when it comes to writing. If you're a filmmaker or a producer, or as I like to say, as a storyteller, part of telling stories is writing. And I learned that I had a long ways to go. And so I would ask, like, how do you become a better writer? Because that was a weakness of mine. And I always was told, in order to be a good writer, you got to read good writing. And you got to write, constantly seeing what good writing is. And, being just me, I was never into like reading books. So I forced myself to read and try to read good writing. But also to that advice that I spoke upon on the first question, is work smarter, not harder. I had to tell myself, how can I become a better writer, smarter, more strategically? And being a former athlete all my life, you think of how athletes get better. They watch film and they study film. They study the greats and they watch and they rewind and watch it. So I would study great writing on TV, because I would get scripts and I would study the writing. I would see, why is this writing good? Why is this particular narrative line good, or this particular sentence good? And I would try to incorporate those techniques, and then adding literary devices, things that we learn in school, alliteration and trying to be poetic, things of that nature. And I was just trying to incorporate that into my writing, but then trying to find my voice and adding literary devices and things I've picked up along the way. I was kind of able to find my way. And so that to answer your question, just trying to be smarter, but doing your due diligence to become a better storyteller.
Great, thank you. And now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Joe, to ask the second question.
Thank you, Liz. So Aaron H., a junior at Bordentown Regional High School, asked, what inspired you to start filmmaking, and what was your biggest challenge at the start?
I always had a passion of telling stories. When I was younger, I was never shy of being in front of the room or in front of a camera. And I always, my family always say, you're so long-winded, just get to the point. But I had to give you the context of the story. I wanted you to visualize what I was saying. And as trying to find, because there's a question, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? I had to do a deep discovery of who I am, and trying to, you hear find yourself. And as on my search of finding myself, I realized I love telling stories. I love telling people's stories, and having a platform of production or broadcasting, you have that ability to tell stories. And I also learned that no matter what sides of the track you grew up on, no matter if you're white, black, blue, or yellow, we all connect by stories. You go back to the biblical days. So all those things are in my mind, like, man, I was born to be a storyteller. That is my passion. I can do it in my sleep. And I had to find, what are you naturally good at that you find joy in? To me, that's your purpose. So to me, once I kind of realized that, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be a storyteller. And then I had to kind of find the perfect way of being a college football player. My dream was make it to the NFL. Unfortunately, I'm height challenged. So I'm 5'8" on a good day, and it says that on my driver's license. So I'm going with that. However, 5'8" guys don't make it to the NFL often. So I had to figure out what was going to be my plan B. And in a sense, I still made it to the NFL. I married storytelling in sports, and particularly football. And I was able to work for a company that made their bread and butter on telling football stories, NFL films. So like to say right place, right time. But I just want to impart on the students here is trying to discover your purpose. What are you naturally good at? And you find joy in, and you can turn that into a career. So that was kind of what helped me fall into this lane of being a producer at NFL films.
Thank you very much. Jasir L, an 11th grader at Hoboken High School, asked, did you always want to be a documentary producer, or did you also want to make narrative movies?
I love Hoboken's coming with the questions. I love it. No, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to tell stories. And I actually started off in live television, which is very much of a just pumping out content. So it's, live TV, you got to get it out. You want to give it to the viewers. Whereas narrative storytelling is more creative, and it's a story, and you have a theme, and you want to build up to a show, and you want to have a beginning, middle, and end. And I just I felt that more so aligned with my skill sets and my gifts. So I was able to pivot to, original storytelling, or as they call it, non-scripted storytelling, where it's just documentary. It's just real raw. You point a camera and you shoot, and you find a subject with a great story, and you try to build a trust and relationship to get them to open up, and you tell their story. You try to find ebbs and flows with it. And a beauty of non-scripted narrative filmmaking and storytelling is you never know what the end's going to be. It's going to take you on a wild ride. But when you just kind of dive in and have to figure out what the story is, and then you're working relentlessly for X amount of hours and days and weeks, and you come up, you see that timeline, you're like, wow, here I have a story here. And then this story can change lives, and that is my passion and goal of any story I tell, is if I can just change one person's life that watches this, inspires or empowers them in some way, then I did my job. So that's kind of how I've been able to find myself as a storyteller.
Great. And Diane B, another junior, this one from Plainfield Academy for the Arts and Advanced Studies, asked, what would you tell an 18-year-old in today's world who is looking to get into film?
Love that question. I would say, take this device that you have, either an iPhone or Android. You don't need a fancy camera. You don't need a DSLR or a Canon or a Sony A7S. That's all good and well, but you don't need it. You can take this in your hand, which shoots 4K, shoots different frame rates. You can buy a cheap tripod on Amazon for less than $20. And then you buy a little bit of accessory of a cell phone mount and go out and tell stories. Use your voice memo to capture audio. Go grab a friend or your brother, your sister, or mom, or dad, or auntie, and say, hey, can you hold this for me while I maybe do, if you want to be an on-air talent, while you do an interview? Or you take your other friend's iPhone and you have them hold it. And it could be a little shaky, because in documentary, you want it to be a little bit not as perfect. So it can have a little shake in it, and just tell a story. There's stories everywhere. The best way to be a storyteller is just by telling stories. And where you are when you're 18 is going to be a lot different when you're like myself at 29. But storytelling is a journey, but you just got to start it, and just learning how to edit. You don't need Adobe Premiere Pro, which is, I'm sure a lot of you are even learning. That's even great. But even if you don't even have that experience, you can, if you have a Apple iMovie, that's how I learned how to edit. I didn't know what in the world was editing, but I learned on iMovie and I've graduated. So at the end of the day, editing is the same thing. It's just maybe a different program. So, but if you're 18 and you want to tell stories, just go out and do it. Just like Nike, just do it.
Just do it. I love how you said, just start, just do it. And so what would be your final words that you would offer to our students to empower them, encourage them as they are still finding their purpose? They're young students, and as they're searching for who they are and searching for their purpose and what mark they're going to make in this world, what words would you leave them with?
I totally understand the pressures and challenge of the world saying, oh, you're going to go to college. What are you going to do for the rest of your life? And you having to make that decision at your age. I understand the burden of that and the pressure. However, you got this, but you can find out what you want to do for the rest of your life, but you have to discover yourself. You have to spend time with yourself. You have to find yourself. You know, one of the greatest sayings I've ever loved was the two most important days of your life is the day you were born and the day you find out why. We all know our birthday, but what is the reason why you were born? And that's your purpose. And if you can tie your purpose to your passion, which can be a career, then you can have a life of fulfillment. But you don't have to wait until you're in your 20s to figure it out. You can figure it out right now. But you just got to ask yourself and constantly ask yourself, what was I called to do? What was I born to do? And that's storytelling. Guys and girls, storytelling can change your life. It can take you across the world. It can bring you in to experiences and meet people that you never could imagine. It can take you so far. And if that's something you're gifted in or you're passionate about, take hold of it right now. And again, the best way to do anything is just by doing it. And even if you fail or you're not good at it, it's okay. You keep on going. And so I would just say, try to find yourself and spend time with yourself, finding your passions, asking yourself, what am I naturally good at that I find joy in? That will be a good help of finding maybe a career that you can pursue. And lastly, just want to tell every one of y'all, beyond career or anything, it's about yourself. Bet on yourself, but also make your family name proud. That's all. That is so important. All of you have a last name. You have a lot of people that have sacrificed a lot for you to be where you are. Make them proud. Make your family name proud in all your decisions and everything you do. And live a life to where people can brag about you.
I have the pleasure of introducing Keith and Kenny Lucas, identical twin comedians, actors, and writers. They are currently writing and starring in the Universal feature film directed by Judd Apatow. They are also writers and co-producers on the Fred Hampton biopic, Judas and the Black Messiah, for which they received an Academy Award nomination and won the WGA Selvin Award. They have 2 additional features in development with Lord Miller Productions and Seth MacFarlane's Fuzzy Door Productions. The Lucas brothers released their first Netflix stand-up special in 2017 to widespread critical acclaim. They acted in 22 Jump Street, Crashing, and The Grinder, and created and starred in the animated series Lucas Bros Moving Company on FXX. Welcome, Keith and Kenny. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks for having us. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Can you share with our students the obstacles you had to face on your journey to success and your decision to become comedians and filmmakers instead of a career in law?
And you want to start?
Yeah. So, I mean, my brother and I, we were, and again, thank you for having us. And we had a pretty turbulent upbringing. I wouldn't say it was like, it wasn't entirely rosy. I mean, we grew up with a single mom. Our dad was locked up when we were 5, I believe. And, we grew up during the crack epidemic in Newark. So, it was a survivalist mentality. We weren't really thinking too much about the arts. It was just really about and we had always had a propensity for storytelling. Our father, right before he got locked up, he took us to the movies all the time, and we'd sit there with him and watch, all sorts of movies, and we fell in love with cinema right then and there. And I think we had an emotional attachment to cinema too, because it was one of the few things we got to do with our father before he was taken away from us. And so I think that started our love. But then, as you're coming out of the hood, you're like, well, I gotta get money. So we went to law school, and we just didn't have a passion for it. We were just more into the arts. I was right across the street from the Comedy Cellar, and so I would just go there and watch all my favorite comedians as I was like doing terrible at law school. And then one day I was like, you know what, let's just drop out and pursue our love. So I called Keith up. He was down at Duke. And I was like, hey, look, let's forego our dreams of being lawyers and really pursue the thing that we love, and that's cinema and entertainment. And I said, one day we might even win an Oscar or get nominated for it. I never said that, but I should have. Either way, I convinced him to drop out, and we didn't pursue. It was our third year of law school. We were just about to graduate. And we said, you know what, let's just go out on a leap of faith. And we pursued our craft. So there were a lot of obstacles. It wasn't easy, but I wouldn't change my journey for anything.
All right, well, thank you for that. And I'm glad that you pursued comedy. Our first question comes from James A., a senior at Hoboken High School. What aspect of filmmaking do you love the most?
That's a great question, James. I would say I love the collaborative nature of it all. Just from the beginning to the very end, you're always working with another person, especially since me and my brother write together. So even from the beginning of the conception of the idea, we're collaborating. And as you progress more into the process, it's even further collaboration. You bring on a director, you bring on producers, you bring on your entire crew. You bring on a cast, you bring on, extras. It's just like a whole list of people that you're working with to try to, bring art to the world. And I think there's just something beautiful about it. Like, so many different minds coming together to try to figure out how to make a piece of art. And, we got to experience it at the highest level with Judas. This is a story about Fred Hampton, who was one of the greatest civil rights leaders to ever exist, and his legacy just sort of loomed all over the production. But to see so many different people come together and work in his spirit, I thought that's the power of cinema. That's the power of filmmaking. That collaborative, the collaborative aspect of it.
And I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Joe.
Thank you, Liz. Maxwell P., a sixth grader from Sacred Heart School, asked, what attracted you to comedy, and do you enjoy being comedians?
Oh, that is an excellent question. I would say what attracted me initially to comedy was just the notion of being able to stand on stage and to speak about whatever you want to speak about. It could be something as serious as mass incarceration, or it could be something as silly as, I don't know, Space Jam. Like that range of just being able to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I think one of the things that really attracted me personally to stand up was being able to work with my brother and to be on stage and to be able to travel all over the world to, see different aspects of the United States, and also to see different aspects of different countries like Montreal and England, and we were supposed to go to Australia, but then COVID hit. But I think just that being able to interact with people on that level in an intimate way is something that I truly cherish about stand up. And I would say, yes, I truly enjoy being a comedian. I think it was one of those things that just allowed for me to see the world in a more holistic way, which I take to filmmaking too. So I think the overlap between stand up and filmmaking is pretty cool.
Diana W., a senior at Plainfield Academy for the Arts and Advanced Studies, asked, do you feel it is still necessary to go to film school with so much information available online about filmmaking? Are there different career paths for filmmakers?
That's a great question, Diane. Thanks for asking. I think it really depends on who you are, what's your financial standing, things of that nature. Like if you feel like you have
I mean, I guess, you know, the resources to go to film school, then, you know, by all means you should do it. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I mean, there are some really, really great filmmakers who didn't go to film school. Quentin Tarantino, Paul Thomas Anderson. You know, you can just, I mean, who else hasn't gone? I mean, we didn't go.
Jordan Peele.
Jordan Peele didn't go to film school. So there are a lot of prominent filmmakers who.
I don't think Oscar went to film school either.
He didn't go to film school. That's a good point. Yeah. So yeah, it's not absolutely necessary. I think what's absolutely necessary is a passion for filmmaking, a passion for cinema. If you have a passion for filmmaking, then you're going to make it happen, irrespective of if you can go to film school or not. Again, we're a primary example of that. We didn't go to film school, but we got a lot of practical knowledge from being on film sets, you know, watching YouTube videos. There's just so much information out there now, and now you have access to camera equipment on your phone, so you can even go out there and just film your own movie. So like, there's just so much more information and more opportunities that I don't think film school is absolutely necessary. But with that said, you know, there are some advantages of going to film school. You know, the connections, the professors you work with. I think there is value in film school, but it's not absolutely necessary.
I completely agree with that assessment. It's correct.
Thank you. Harley G, a junior at Hoboken High School, asked, what were the changes, if any, director Shaka King made to the screenplay Judas and the Black Messiah? Do you feel the changes made the story better?
I mean, Shaka, that's an excellent question. And I think this also harkens back to the collaborative process. Shaka's a genius. And from the inception of the idea, we worked with him to craft the story. And then he went off to write the script. So, I mean, everything that we wanted to be in the story was included. And not only was it included, but it was enhanced by his knowledge of cinematic techniques, his proficiency, his genius. I mean, every change that the one change is, you know, we had written it so that the church scene takes place in the first act, and that was wrong. From when you watch the film, it's clear that the church scene should take place in the middle of the film as Hampton is arriving back from prison. It was an excellent choice among many of the choices that Shaka made. So it was a privilege. And I'm sorry,
Shaka and Will.
I'm sorry. I'm just speaking about the director. But Shaka and Will. I think Shaka is one of the most amazing filmmakers, and it was a privilege to be able to work and see his, you know, craft and how he approached the filmmaking process. It was truly an honor.
Just watched it recently. I really loved it. And our last question comes from Xavier F., senior at Plainfield Academy for Arts and Advanced Studies. Can you make a sustainable living being a filmmaker in 2022?
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Thank you for asking. Can you make a sustainable living as a filmmaker in 2022? Yeah, you can. You can, without a doubt. It's not going to be easy when you first start. I mean, nothing is. It's going to be some barriers of entry. There's going to be, you know, there's obviously seniority, so you have to work your way through that. But like, I feel like if you figure out your voice and you have enough passion and enough love, like when there's a will, there's a way. When we first started, obviously we weren't making any money. Like, we were writing on spec. None of our screenplays were being sold. You know what I mean? Like, it's a battle, you know what I mean? And you have to prepare yourself for that battle, because no one's going to just hand you anything. But I think if you work really hard, and again, you have that passion to succeed, and you have that will, like, you can make something happen. So yeah, I think, yeah, there is a way to have a sustainable living, but you have to also recognize that it's not going to begin that way. You got to grind to that level.
And I would add with the increase in streaming and the internet, more opportunities are being opened for filmmakers to sort of experiment, and so we're not just left to the box office and cinema and studios. You can work with networks, you can work with streamers, and you can make film And there are just way more opportunities, I'd say, now than ever
Right.
before.
And you see a lot of people like, making web series, and they go from making a web series to having a network TV show. You know what I mean? I've seen that plenty of times. And these are people with, very little resources. So, when there's a will, there's a way, and there's so many more opportunities. I mean, again, we're primary examples of it. Like if you really, really believe in yourself and you're really, really relentless, you can make it happen.
Thank you so much for that. And then our final question is, any last thoughts or remarks that you would like to leave with our students here today? Some of them are graduating high school, some are just moving on to their next phase in life, entering high school. How would you empower them in their journey?
I would say stay passionate, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to, challenge the orthodoxy or the established or perceived, right way. This is the time to sort of make those mistakes, because as you get older, it becomes a little bit more intense. So work hard, stay persistent, and challenge.
Yeah, and I would say, don't be afraid to fail. There's no such thing as failure. I think every time you try, you make an attempt at creating something, that's a success. And so, I would say just like be persistent, be relentless, and if you really, really want to be a filmmaker, like you can do it and you can make it happen. And you just truly have to believe in yourself, and don't let anyone try to like knock you off your path. If you really believe in yourself, you can make things happen.
Thank you for tuning in today. I'd like to thank all of our schools. I'd like to thank our staff, and this was an amazing program. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye.